Captain Aaron McHale stood at the helm of the Federation flagship Sovereign, his gaze fixed on the view screen. The stars shimmered in the distance, vast and quiet, as they sailed through the uncharted sector of space. As a seasoned officer in the Galactic Federation, Aaron had faced many challenges, but nothing compared to what lay ahead. The mission was supposed to be simple: survey a newly discovered star system, gather data, and move on. Nothing that would put them in harm's way. Yet, as he observed the readings on the monitor, a cold shiver ran down his spine. Something was wrong. "Captain, we're detecting strange energy readings from a nearby moon," reported Lieutenant Choi, his voice steady but tinged with concern. "It's unlike anything we've seen before." Aaron's instincts kicked in. "Steady, Lieutenant. Set a course to investigate. Stay alert." As they drew closer to the moon, the ship's sensors began to go haywire. Their communications were jammed, and a deep sense of unease settled over the crew. Aaron could feel it, the oppressive silence that often came before a storm. Suddenly, without warning, a flash of light erupted from the shadows of the moon's surface. The Sovereign lurched violently as enemy fire slammed into its shields. "Shields at 60%, shouted Ensign Patel, her hands flying over the controls. "Return fire!" Aaron barked, his mind racing. He had trained for this moment. But nothing could prepare him for what came next. The view screen flickered, and then, through the static, the image of an alien ship appeared. It was massive, sleek, and imposing, its hull covered in strange markings that glowed with an eerie light. A cold, mechanical voice echoed through the bridge. "This is Commander Scylla of the Zyrixian fleet. You are in violation of Zyrixian space. Surrender immediately or face destruction." The name sent a chill down Aaron's spine. Scylla. The name was legendary. She was the ruthless commander of the Zyrixian Empire, a war-hardened alien race known for their advanced technology and merciless tactics. No one dared defy her. No one had ever survived an encounter with her. "Captain, we're outmatched." Lieutenant Choi's voice was full of panic. "Their weapons are more advanced than ours." Aaron's mind raced. The Federation had always prided itself on its diplomacy, but this was different. There was no room for negotiation here. His instincts told him they were in grave danger. Still, there was no way he was going to surrender without a fight. "Red alert," Aaron ordered. "All hands, brace for impact." The ship rocked again as another round of fire pounded the shields. The crew worked in a flurry of motion, but Aaron knew it. It was only a matter of time before their defenses would fail. Just as hope seemed to fade, the unthinkable happened. Zila's voice came through the comms once more, but this time there was an unexpected tone in it. "Captain McHale," she said, her voice cold and commanding yet oddly measured. "I have been observing your ship's actions. You fight with courage, but it is futile. However, your bravery has earned my attention." Aaron's heart skipped a beat. Was she offering them mercy? "Why?" he asked, his voice steady, though his mind was still reeling. "Because," Zila continued, "there is more to you than I expected. Your kind is unpredictable. I find that interesting. Surrender, Captain, and you will be spared." Aaron's brow furrowed. He had heard rumors of Zila's strange decisions, of times when she had spared enemies against all odds, but he never imagined he would be the recipient of such mercy. It made no sense. Yet, what choice did he have? "We'll fight to the last." "Man," Aaron responded, his voice filled with resolve. "We won't surrender to anyone." A pause followed, and for a moment it felt like the entire galaxy held its breath. Then Zila's next words came as a surprise. "I will not destroy you, Captain McHale, but you and your crew will be taken prisoner." Her voice softened, just for a second. "Your fight is over for now." With that, the massive Zyrixian ship unleashed a final burst of energy, not aimed at the Sovereign, but at its engines. The ship, shuddered as their power began to drain away, and Aaron realized, with a sense of helplessness, that they had been neutralized. "Prepare for boarding," Aaron ordered, his tone grim. The crew began to follow orders, ready to face whatever came next. As he made his way to the command deck's outer chamber, he couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was far from over. In fact, he had the distinct sense that it had just begun. The airlock opened, and a squad of heavily armored Zyrixian soldiers boarded the Sovereign, their towering forms imposing and nearly alien in their mechanical precision. Aaron's heart raced. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and captured. But as the doors to the bridge opened and Commander Zila herself entered, he felt something unexpected. For all her fearsome reputation, there was something almost human in her eyes, a flicker of understanding, a brief moment of recognition. She regarded Aaron with an intensity that almost seemed personal, and for reasons he couldn't explain, he felt a strange connection. The alien commander who had once struck terror into the hearts of entire fleets now stood before him, and Aaron. Mikhail was uncertain what his next move would be. He had no idea that this was the beginning of something far more complex than a simple battle. In that moment, their destinies became entwined in ways neither of them could possibly predict. Captain Aaron Mikhail sat in the small cold cell aboard the Zyrixian ship, his mind spinning. The walls were smooth and metallic, reflecting the harsh light from above. There was nothing comforting about the room, only the sharp scent of unfamiliar technology and the hum of machinery from all directions. He had expected to be treated as an enemy, perhaps tortured for information, but the reality was different. Zila had spared him and his crew, at least for now, but what did that mean? Why had she chosen to take them prisoner instead of simply destroying them? The sounds of the ship's endless corridors echoed through the thin walls, a constant reminder of how far he was from home. Alone in his thoughts, Aaron leaned against the cold surface of the wall. His mind kept drifting back to the moment he first saw Zila up close. Her eyes, those piercing, intelligent eyes, had looked past him as though studying him, almost as if she was reading his very soul. He couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed in that moment. She wasn't. Like the ruthless alien commanders he had read about in Federation reports, there was something different about her. Just as Aaron lost himself in thought, the sound of heavy boots approaching caught his attention. The door to his cell slid open with a hiss, and two Zyrixian guards stepped inside. They were massive, towering over him with their armor shining under the dim lights. Without a word, they motioned for him to follow them. Aaron stood up, straightening his uniform as he was led through the narrow, winding hallways of the ship. The alien guards didn't speak, but their presence made it clear that escape was not an option. He had no choice but to follow, his mind racing as they moved through the ship. They reached a large chamber filled with alien technology he couldn't begin to understand. At the center of the room stood Zila. She was tall and imposing, her sharp features softened only by the faint glow of her armor. Despite the military atmosphere, there was an undeniable elegance in her stance. She turned to face him as he entered, and her eyes locked with his. For a brief moment, Aaron could see something flicker behind her cold exterior, a trace of curiosity, even hesitation. "You are Captain Mikhail," she said, her voice as commanding as ever. "I trust you are well?" Aaron didn't know how to respond. He had expected something different, a harsh interrogation perhaps, or a lecture about the superiority of her people. But instead, she seemed almost polite. "I'm alive," he said simply, trying to keep his tone neutral. Gila nodded, a small gesture that seemed almost human. "That is a relief. I would not want to start a war with your people just yet. Your Federation is much more troublesome than I had imagined." Her words struck Aaron in an unexpected way. She wasn't treating him like a prisoner to be broken. She wasn't even mocking him. Instead, it was almost as though she was genuinely interested in understanding him. "I'm not sure what to make of that," Aaron replied. You had no problem attacking us earlier. You nearly destroyed us." Zila's expression softened slightly, but there was no sign of regret in her eyes. "It was necessary. My people demand results. They do not tolerate failure, and I was ordered to eliminate all threats to our expansion. You are a skilled commander, Captain. You fought well, but you were not my true target. Your ship, your Federation, this is a much larger matter." Aaron's brow furrowed. "Then why keep me alive? You could have wiped us out easily." Zila stepped closer, her presence imposing but not threatening. "Because you interest me. Your species, humans, are unlike any I have encountered before. You fight not because you think you will win, but because you refuse to give up. This is a quality I find fascinating." Aaron had heard the rumors about her, how she often spared opponents who showed exceptional courage, but he hadn't believed them. Now, facing her, he couldn't help but wonder if those stories were true. "What do you want from me?" Aaron asked, his voice cautious. Zila paused, considering him. "I want to know more about your people, about your tactics, about your resolve. Your Federation is powerful, but I believe it is also fragile. Your leaders don't understand the nature of true strength. They think in terms of diplomacy and compromise, but they fail to see that true power lies in the ability to destroy and rebuild, to control." Aaron didn't know how to respond. The idea that Zila could be genuinely curious about humans, about their resilience, was both strange and unsettling. She wasn't the monster he had expected, but then again, he knew very little about her. "You could have killed me, Commander," Aaron said, his tone a little firmer. "But you didn't. What does that say about you?" Zila's gaze hardened for a moment as though she was considering something deeply personal. Finally, she spoke. "It says that I am more than just a conqueror, that I understand the cost of war, the cost of power." She took a step back, her posture shifting slightly. "I offer you a choice, Captain McHale. You may stay in your cell, where you will live out your days as a prisoner, or you may work with me. Help me understand your people. Teach me what makes humans different. Perhaps, together, we can find a way to coexist, or perhaps we will be forced into conflict." Aaron was taken aback. This was not what he had expected. He had thought Zila would demand obedience or break him down, but instead, she was offering him something else. It wasn't an easy choice. Working with her meant betraying everything he had known about his people, about the Federation, but staying here, isolated, would serve no purpose. "I'll help you," he said, finally making up his mind. "But I'm doing it on my terms. No games, no manipulation." Zila nodded, her eyes gleaming with something Aaron couldn't quite place. "Very well, you have made your choice. We will see what you can teach me, Captain." As Aaron turned to leave, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something far larger than he had ever imagined. The battle for survival had taken an unexpected turn, and now the fate of both their species might lie in their hands. Captain Aaron McHale's days aboard the Xerixian ship had taken a turn he never expected. When he had first been taken prisoner, he had imagined the worst: interrogation, endless demands for information, and possibly an untimely end. But none of that had happened. Instead, Zila, the feared commander of the Xerixian Empire, had made an offer that Aaron could hardly refuse. She wanted his help, his knowledge to understand humans and their tactics. At first, he had been skeptical. How could a commander as ruthless as Zila want anything other than domination? Yet, as the days passed, Aaron began to realize that she was not the monster he had been led to believe. Yes, she was a skilled and powerful leader, but there was something more, something human, buried beneath the layers of armor and authority. Now, sitting across from Zila in a small private chamber on her ship, Aaron was beginning to see her in a new light. The room, stark and utilitarian, was filled with unfamiliar technology, but it also had an odd sense of quietness. Zila, standing tall and poised as ever, was examining him closely. It felt like she was reading him, examining his every move, every word. "I'm curious," she began, breaking the silence that had stretched between them. "What is it that drives you, Captain McHale? Your people are young, untested compared to the great empires of the galaxy. Why do you fight so fiercely for survival?" Aaron was taken aback by the question. He had expected questions about tactics or strategy, but this was different. "We fight because we have to," he said slowly, searching for the right words. "Humanity has always been about survival, but survival doesn't just mean fighting for your life. It means fighting for the people you care about, for your freedom. We don't have the advanced technology or overwhelming numbers that some species have, but we make up for it with determination. We never give up, even when it seems impossible." Zila tilted her head slightly, her eyes narrowing as if she was trying to understand his words more deeply. "Determination," she repeated, her voice thoughtful. "I see. You don't fear the inevitable. You face it, and you keep moving forward." Aaron nodded. "Exactly." There was a long pause before Zila spoke again. "That is something I respect. It's not a trait many beings possess, and it is why I offered you this choice." She stepped closer to him, her gaze steady and unyielding. "You could have chosen to resist. You could have fought against me, but you didn't. Instead, you chose to help me." Aaron didn't reply immediately. The truth was, he had no idea why he had made that choice. A part of him still couldn't trust Zila completely. She was, after all, the commander of the very empire that had nearly destroyed his ship. Yet, another part of him, the part that had watched her during their previous conversations, had seen a side of her that few had the chance to witness. She was not just a conqueror. She was a leader, trapped in a system that demanded power at any cost. "I'm not sure I can help you fully," Aaron finally said. "I don't know much about your people. We've only had brief encounters with the Zyrixians, and they've never been peaceful." Yila's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of something, perhaps regret, across her face. "No, they haven't. My people are warriors, bred for conflict. We have never known peace, and those who have tried to lead us in another direction have been silenced. I am not like them, Captain. I want more than just conquest." Her admission surprised Aaron. It wasn't what he had expected to hear from the ruthless commander, who had attacked his ship without hesitation. She spoke as if she was trapped in her own role, bound by the expectations of her people, yet yearning for something else. "I don't want to destroy," Zila continued. "I want to create. I want to see a galaxy where beings from different worlds can coexist. But I cannot do that alone." Aaron studied her for a moment. Could it be that Zila, the very commander who had nearly obliterated his fleet, was trying to break free from the very system she led? He still wasn't sure if he believed her completely, but he could see the conviction in her eyes. "You want to change things," he said slowly, his voice uncertain. "But why me? Why ask a human for help? Why not find someone from your own, people who shares that vision?" Zila's gaze softened just slightly. "Because, Captain McHale, you humans are unpredictable. You don't follow the same rules that other species do. You take risks, you make alliances with those who have been your enemies. And in a way, that is the strength you have, the strength that my people have lost." For the first time, Aaron saw something almost human in her. Vulnerability, perhaps, or maybe just the weight of leadership that had worn her down over time. She had taken a risk, trusting him, even though he was from a species she had always seen as weak. And now she was offering him a chance to help her find another way. "I'm not saying I trust you yet," Aaron said, standing up and facing her directly. "But if you're serious about this, about changing the way things are done, then I'll help. I'll show you what humans are capable of. But understand this, Commander. If you betray that trust, I won't hesitate to stop you, no matter what happens between us." Ayila's expression hardened, but there was a flicker of understanding in her eyes. "I would expect nothing less from you, Captain." There was an unspoken agreement between them in that moment, an understanding that they were allies, but only on their own terms. They both had their own goals, their own motives, but for now, they needed each other, and in that they had found a fragile yet powerful bond. As they left the chamber together, Aaron couldn't help but feel that this strange partnership with Zila was only the beginning of something far more complicated. The galaxy was vast, and their actions would ripple across it in ways they couldn't yet predict. But for now, they would have to work together, each wondering if they could trust the other with their lives and, perhaps, their future. The days aboard the Zyrixian ship had started to blur together, each one much like the last. Captain Aaron McHale had found himself spending more and more time with Zila, but it was not the tension-filled moments he had expected. Instead, their interactions had begun to shift, less about confrontation and more about conversation. He couldn't deny it anymore. They were starting to understand each other. Aaron had always known that understanding an enemy was crucial. But with Zila, it was different. She was not just an enemy, nor was she simply an ally. She was something far more complex, and as much as he tried to resist, he found himself drawn to the person behind the commander. They spent hours discussing their cultures, their histories, their dreams for the future. For a while, Aaron found himself surprised by how much he learned from Zila, not just about her people, the Zyrixians, but about herself. She had led armies, commanded fleets, and destroyed entire civilizations. But when they spoke of their childhoods, their families, she revealed a side of herself that no one, not even her closest advisors, had ever seen. Yila's life had been one of conflict, shaped by the expectations of her people. She had risen to power through strength and cunning, defeating rivals and proving herself again and again. But the burden of leadership weighed heavily on her. She confided in Aaron that there were times when she wondered if there was more to life than the endless wars. She had learned early on that the only way to survive was to keep moving forward, no matter the cost. "You're not the only one who's had to fight for survival," Zila had once said to him during one of their conversations. Her voice, usually so controlled, had softened. "We all have our battles, Captain McHale. Some are just more visible than others." Aaron had never expected her to open up like that. For a moment it felt like they were two people, not leaders of warring factions. They were just two beings trying to make sense of a universe that had often seemed indifferent to their struggles. But even with these moments of understanding, there was still a wall between them, a boundary that neither of them could fully cross. For all the conversations they shared, Aaron still saw Zila as the commander who had attacked his ship, the same one who led her people with an iron fist. And she, though she was starting to trust him, could not forget that he was still a human, an outsider, someone whose species had long been an enemy to her people. One evening, after another long day of discussing strategies and political matters, Zila invited Aaron to walk with her on the observation deck. The vast expanse of space stretched out before them, a sea of stars that seemed endless. The hum of the ship's engines was the only sound that broke the silence between them. "This is one of the few places on my ship where I can feel peace," Zila said, her voice quieter than usual. She stood by the observation window, her gaze fixed on the stars, as if searching for something in the void of space. "Out there, it's all endless wars and politics. But here, I can just breathe." Aaron joined her by the window, his gaze following hers, but his thoughts were elsewhere. He had seen her take command in battle, heard her voice echoing orders that left no room for weakness. Yet here, now, she seemed different, almost fragile. He wondered if she ever regretted the path she had chosen. She had become a symbol of fear and power. But was that truly what she wanted? "I've been thinking a lot," Aaron said, breaking the silence. "About what you said, about wanting something more than just war." Zila turned her head slightly, her expression unreadable. "And what have you concluded?" "I don't think it's as simple as just wanting peace," Aaron replied. "I think it's about change, real change. It's not enough to stop fighting. There's more to it than that. It's about finding a way to build something new, something better." Zila's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "You think I don't know that?" Aaron was surprised by the edge in her voice. "I didn't mean it like that. It's just, sometimes it feels like you're carrying the weight of the entire galaxy on your shoulders, and that's not something any one person can do alone." For a moment, Zila was silent, her gaze fixed on the stars again. "Maybe that's why I've spent so much time alone," she said softly, more to herself than to Aaron. "Maybe that's why I've always been so focused on the battle. Because it's easier than facing the truth." Aaron didn't press her for more details. He could sense that this conversation was one she wasn't ready to finish, but he understood something important in that moment. Zila was not just a commander of armies. She was a person, a leader who had been forced into a role that demanded strength, ruthlessness, and power. And now, it seemed like she was trying to find a way out, a way to reshape her future, just as much as she wanted to reshape the galaxy. "I think you're stronger than you realize," Aaron said quietly, his voice full of conviction. "You don't have to carry all of this by yourself. We can find a way forward, together." Zila didn't respond immediately. Instead, she glanced at him, her expression unreadable. But there was something in her eyes, a flicker of something that hadn't been there before. Maybe it was hope, maybe it was doubt. Either way, it was enough to make Aaron believe that this unlikely alliance, this strange partnership between him and the Xerixian commander, had the potential to change everything. They stood in silence for a long while, watching the stars. There was an unspoken understanding between them now, a bond forged not through force or fear, but through shared experiences and an acknowledgement of each other's burdens. For the first time, Aaron felt like he was starting to understand Zila, not just as a commander, but as a person. And perhaps, for the first time, she was beginning to understand him in the same way. As they turned to leave the observation deck, neither of them spoke. But, for the first time since their paths had crossed, Aaron McHale felt like they were walking the same path, side by side. And for the first time, he wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew one thing. Whatever happened, it would be shaped by their choices, their alliance, and the growing trust between them. The peace that had begun to form between Captain Aaron McHale and Zila felt fragile, like a thread holding together two seemingly incompatible worlds. Their conversations had shifted from tense exchanges about strategy to discussions about their people's futures. But underneath it all, the reality of their situation had not changed. The war was not over. Their time together had been peaceful, but that peace was always under threat, and it seemed it would never last. Yila had begun to make changes within her fleet, slowly reshaping her empire in ways she had once thought impossible. She had started introducing new tactics, ones that relied less on brute force and more on diplomacy. It was a risky move, one that could easily backfire, but Aaron had been there to support her in every step. He had shared his knowledge, explaining how the Federation had navigated the complexities of interspecies diplomacy and how they had forged alliances with cultures vastly different from their own. But even as they worked together to create a new path, neither of them could ignore the growing unrest that had started to bubble beneath the surface of Zila's empire. There were those among her people who did not share her vision. The Xerixian Empire had been built on conquest and dominance, and many still believed that strength was the only way to lead. They didn't trust Zila's new direction, and they were willing to do whatever it took to maintain the old ways. It was late one evening when Aaron and Zila were summoned. To the command center, a warship had intercepted an emergency distress signal, and the news it carried was both surprising and troubling. "Captain McHale," Zila said, her voice cold and focused as she looked at the data on the screen. "It seems we have a new problem." Aaron stood by her side, his eyes narrowing as he studied the incoming report. A large fleet of Zyrixian ships, those loyal to the more traditionalists within the Empire, had gathered near the outskirts of a neutral system. The message they sent was clear. Zyla's leadership was being challenged. It was a call for rebellion, and it threatened to undo everything they had worked for. "We need to act fast," Aaron said, his mind already racing through the options. "If we don't address this now, it could escalate into full-scale war." Zila's expression hardened. "I know, and if it comes to that, I will fight, but not as a conqueror, as a leader." Aaron turned to her, his gaze softening. "You don't have to do this alone. I'll stand with you. We'll find a way to stop this." Zila's eyes met his, and for a moment there was a flicker of something more between them, something that went beyond strategy and politics. It was a look that spoke of trust, of a bond that had grown in the face of impossible odds. She didn't say anything, but the silent understanding passed between them, as it always did. The rebellion was swift, and soon the Empire was in turmoil. Zila's fleet, which had once been unified under her command, was now split. The rebel faction, led by a high-ranking general who had once been her closest advisor, began to rally Zyrixian forces loyal to the old ways. As the rebellion grew stronger, so did the tension between Aaron and Zila. She knew the stakes, but she couldn't help but feel a deep personal betrayal is far from over, Captain. But we will face it together. And with that, they knew that, whatever came next, they would continue their fight. Not for conquest, but for a future where both their species could live in peace. The tension in the air was palpable as Captain Aaron McHale and Commander Zila stood in the war room, staring at the display of the galaxy's shifting balance. The rebellion had forced Zila into a position she had long avoided, a decision that could either tear apart the fragile peace she had fought so hard to create, or lead to the downfall of the empire she had spent years building. The rebellion had not only fractured her own people but had drawn the attention of other powerful forces, including the Federation, which had shown up uninvited in an attempt to restore order. For a long time, Zila had kept her focus on the larger picture. She had hoped to reshape her people's future, to find a way to lead without the constant need for war. But the more she tried, been forced into a position of power and had to fight for every inch of her position. She wasn't evil. She wasn't the villain in this story. She was a leader who had made difficult choices in order to survive. And now, she was trying to build something better. Something that Aaron could get behind. "The Federation doesn't see things the way we do," Aaron admitted. "They still see you as the enemy. They won't give up on their ideals easily. But I believe that if we show them another way, if we prove that peace is possible, we can change their minds. It won't be easy, but nothing worth having ever is." Zila's expression hardened, and for a moment Aaron could see the old commander in her, the woman who had always fought with everything she had. But then, that look softened. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for a future that didn't rely on war and bloodshed. "We can't change everything overnight," Zila said slowly. "But perhaps we don't need to. Maybe we just need to start by proving to the galaxy that we're different, that I am different." Aaron nodded. "And we will. Together." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of plans, meetings, and tense negotiations. Zila's leadership was tested like never before, but this time, she wasn't facing it alone. Aaron stood by her, offering strategies and support that had proven effective with the Federation. He spoke to those who had once been her enemies, urging them to see the truth behind her vision. Slowly but surely, they began to listen. But not everyone was convinced. The more traditional factions of the Zyrixian Empire still believed that power through war was the only path to victory. They sought to undermine Zila's efforts at every turn, using any means necessary to discredit her and those who stood with her. One evening, just as Aaron was preparing for another meeting with a group of neutral leaders, a message arrived. A troubling one. The rebels had launched a new offensive against Zila's forces, and they were gaining ground. The situation was dire. The rebellion was no longer just a political threat. It was a military one, and Zila had to make a choice. Take up arms, again, or risk losing everything she had worked so hard to build. "I will not let them destroy what we've started," Zila said, her voice filled with determination. "I will fight, but this time, I fight not to conquer, but to protect." Aaron stood by her side, his resolve firm. "Then we fight together." In that moment, Zila knew there was no turning back. She would have to face her own people, face her enemies, and fight for the future she believed in. But she also knew that she didn't have to do it alone. She had Aaron by her side, and together they would prove that change was possible, even in the face of war. The final battle had come. The stars outside the warship's observation window were a sea of fire and sparks as the last remnants of Zila's enemies, both rebels and those who had once been her allies, clashed with the forces she had spent so long trying to rebuild. The Zyrixian Empire was at war with itself, but this time Zila was fighting for something entirely different. She was not fighting for dominance or power. She was fighting for the future, for a future where her people could finally be free from the chains of endless war. Captain Aaron McHale stood beside her, watching the battle unfold. The hum of the ship's engines was the only sound that filled the room, but the weight of the situation hung heavy between them. They had come a long way, and though they had learned to trust each other, this was their greatest test yet. "You're ready for this," Aaron said, breaking the silence. His voice was calm, but there was an edge of determination in it. Zila didn't respond immediately. She stood tall, her gaze fixed on the tactical display in front of them. The rebellion had taken its toll on her people, and now her final decision would shape the future. She could feel the weight of the choices she had made, the sacrifices, and the promise of what could be, a galaxy where peace was more than just a fleeting dream. "I've never been more ready," Zila said finally, her voice low, almost as if she were speaking to herself. "But this isn't just about fighting. This is about what comes next." Aaron nodded. He understood exactly what she meant. They had spent months building a vision that had once seemed impossible, but now was within reach. Together, they had worked to change the mindset of the Zyrixian Empire. They had forged alliances, and though it had been difficult, they had begun to see signs of change in the hearts of those who followed her. But the old guard, the ones who still believed in conquest and domination, would not go down without a fight. "We will win," Aaron said, his voice firm. "But the real battle isn't here. It's after. It's about what we do with this victory." Zila turned to look at him, a spark of understanding in her eyes. "Yes, the real challenge is what we build after this. It's not enough to defeat our enemies. We have to show the galaxy that we're not the same people who fought in endless wars. We have to show them that there is another way." The battle outside had intensified, and now, the final phase of the war was in motion. Zila's fleet had received a decisive blow, but her forces were holding strong, resisting the rebellion's final push. It was only a matter of time before her forces would engage in one final confrontation. But as much as Aaron knew that victory was crucial, he also understood that the real test was what happened after. He stepped closer to Zila, his eyes meeting hers. "Whatever happens, we'll make it work, together." Zila's eyes softened for a moment. There was a flicker of something in her expression, something she had been reluctant to show until now. It was trust, perhaps, or maybe even hope. She nodded slowly, then turned her gaze back to the stars, to the endless possibilities that lay ahead. "I've always believed that power is the key to survival," she said quietly, "but you've shown me that there is another way. Strength lies in the willingness to change, to adapt. If we are to move forward, we cannot remain as we were. We must evolve." Aaron placed a hand on her shoulder, offering a silent promise. He had seen the transformation in her, how she had grown from the cold, ruthless commander who had led a war machine into someone who was now fighting for a cause greater than herself. Together, they had fought side by side, and in doing so, they had found something even more powerful than the strength of their armies, the strength of their unity. The final battle arrived sooner than expected. Rebel ships, led by the last remnants of the old guard, came charging toward Zila's fleet. The chaos was unlike anything Aaron had ever experienced. The clash of ships, the explosions lighting up the vastness of space, it was the kind of fight that had been the trademark of countless battles, and yet there was something different about this one. This time, there was a shared understanding between the two sides, a desire to end the conflict for good. The sound of explosions echoed throughout the warship as it shook from the force of the blasts. But Zila's fleet held strong, and with Aaron's leadership and her own command, they began to turn the tide. The rebels were relentless, but they lacked the unity that Zila's forces had now found. And slowly, steadily, Zila's ships began to push the rebels back. As the battle reached its peak, Zila gave the final command. "End this," she said, her voice unwavering. "Let them see that we fight for something more than just power." In that moment, the battle began to shift. Zila's fleet launched one final coordinated strike, overpowering the rebels and forcing them into retreat. The conflict, which had seemed endless, finally came to an end. As the last of the enemy ships fled, Zila and Aaron stood together, watching as the stars outside the observation window returned to their peaceful, endless dance. "We did it," Aaron said, his voice full of quiet relief. Zila turned to him, her eyes reflecting the depth of what they had just accomplished. "We did," she agreed, "but this isn't the end, Captain. It's just the beginning." In the weeks that followed, Zila worked tirelessly to restore peace to the Empire. With Aaron's help, they negotiated with the leaders of the factions that had once fought against them. They worked together to rebuild, focusing on creating alliances and ensuring that no one would have to fight for power ever again. It wasn't easy, and there were moments of doubt, but with each step, they proved that their new path was possible. The galaxy began to change, slowly at first, but steadily. The idea that peace could be achieved through unity rather than conquest began to spread. And as Zila's people slowly accepted the new vision she had fought so hard for, the war-torn galaxy began to heal. Aaron and Zila stood at the center of it all, two leaders who had once been enemies, but who had now come together to forge a future where their species could coexist. They had proven that change was possible, that no matter how broken something seemed, it could always be rebuilt, piece by piece. As they looked to the stars, they knew the road ahead would not always be easy, but together they were ready to face whatever came next. And so, a new chapter began for both of them, one built on trust, unity, and the hope for a peaceful future.